The snow had been falling for so long that the world felt muted, as if the sky itself was holding its breath, white flakes drifting down in slow silence and covering the broken outskirts of the human settlement, where rusted metal walls groaned under the cold and weak lights flickered like tired eyes. Inside one of the smallest shelters, a thin metal box patched together with scrap, a 5-year-old human boy sat curled near a heater that barely worked, his knees pulled to his chest and his fingers red from the cold, wrapped tightly in a faded blue blanket that smelled like home and warmth and the quiet safety of his mother's arms. His name was Eli, and the blanket was the last thing his mother had left him before the evacuation, before soldiers with tired faces rushed people onto transports and promised they would come back. Promises that still hung in the air like ghosts. Outside, the wind howled louder, carrying with it a sound that did not belong to Earth. A soft, broken whimper that cut through the storm and slid under the metal door like a plea. Eli lifted his head, his breath fogging in front of him as his wide eyes searched the darkness. His small heart pounding with fear and curiosity mixed together, the way it always did when something unknown called out. Another sound came, weaker this time, followed by a faint scratching, slow and uncoordinated. He stood up, the cold biting immediately at his bare feet, and took small, careful steps toward the door, each movement a battle between what he had been taught and what he felt deep inside. His hand hesitated on the latch, the wind pushing against it from the other side, as if warning him. When he finally pulled it open, the night spilled in, freezing air rushing over him, snow swirling into the shelter, and there, huddled together just beyond the threshold, were two small shapes unlike anything he had ever seen. They were twins, though Eli did not know the word yet. Their bodies thin and trembling, skin a soft iridescent silver blue that caught the weak light and reflected it like frost. Their large eyes half closed, glowing faintly with exhaustion and pain. They were alien. Even to a child it was obvious, delicate ridges along their temples, fingers too long and joints bent at unfamiliar angles, breaths coming in shallow, uneven gasps that fogged differently than his own. They clutched each other desperately, small hands locked tight as if letting go would mean vanishing. One of them tried to speak, a sound clicking softly in the throat, then failing, the effort costing more than it could afford. Eli felt fear rise up, sharp and fast, his legs trembling as badly as theirs, every story he had overheard about aliens and danger and war flashing through his mind. But beneath that fear was something stronger, heavier, something that made his chest ache. They were cold. He knew what cold felt like. He knew the way it crawled into bones and made everything hurt and quiet and slow. He remembered his mother wrapping the blanket around him and whispering that warmth was something you shared, not something you kept hidden. The twins' eyes opened wider when they noticed him, panic flickering there, mixed with something else, hope maybe or disbelief. They tried to pull themselves back, leaving thin lines in the snow, but their bodies refused to obey. Eli swallowed hard, his small shoulders straightening. He took a step forward, then another, the cold biting deeper, and slowly he slipped the blanket from around himself, the sudden loss of warmth making him shiver violently. The blanket dragged behind him as he knelt, his fingers numb, his movements clumsy but careful. The twins watched in stunned silence as he wrapped the fabric around both of them, tucking it gently the way his mother used to do, making sure it covered their thin shoulders and fragile forms. One of the twins let out a sound, not fear this time but something broken and overwhelmed, their glowing eyes filling with moisture that froze along the lashes. The other reached out hesitantly, touching the blanket, then Eli's hand, the contact electric and strange. Eli smiled, small and shaky, his lips blue now. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice barely louder than the wind. "I was cold too." The words meant nothing to the twins, but the tone did everything. Inside the blanket, something changed. Hidden beneath the fabric, tiny crystalline markings along the twins' skin began to glow brighter, responding not to heat alone but to intent, to sacrifice, to a level of empathy their species measured only in legends. Far above the frozen clouds, sensors aboard an alien warship screamed to life, alarms cascading through the command deck as ancient protocols activated. A soldier froze mid-step, staring at the display in disbelief. A princess rose from her seat, her breath catching as she felt it too, the pull of destiny snapping tight. On a forgotten human outpost, a 5-year-old boy knelt in the snow, shaking and exposed, while 2 alien children clutched his blanket like a lifeline. And across the stars, law, fate, and war all began to move, drawn by a single act of kindness that should never have existed. The warmth of the blanket was weak by any normal measure, thin fabric frayed at the edges, but to the alien twins it felt like fire after endless night. Their bodies shuddering as sensation returned in slow, painful waves, nerves waking from near death and carrying both relief and agony through their fragile forms. Eli stayed kneeling even as his teeth began to chatter uncontrollably. His small hands resting on the blanket as if letting go might somehow steal the warmth back. His breath coming out in quick clouds that vanished into the storm. The twins pressed closer together beneath the fabric, instinctively curling inward, the way their species had done for millions of cycles when facing extinction-level cold. But something was different now, something unfamiliar and deeply unsettling. They were not alone. The smaller twin turned its head slightly, its large luminous eyes focusing on Eli's face, studying the blue lips, the shaking shoulders, the thin arms wrapped around nothing, and a feeling surged through its chest that had no clean translation. It was guilt. Alien law taught that survival was paramount, that lesser species were variables, that emotional interference weakened outcomes. Yet here was a child sacrificing warmth without calculation, without hesitation, without reason that fit any model they had ever learned. The larger twin tried to move, a faint whine escaping its throat as muscles protested, and Eli immediately leaned forward, his instinct overriding his fear. "Don't move," he murmured softly, though he did not know if they could hear him. "You'll feel better soon." The twins did not understand the words, but they felt the promise behind them. Inside their chests, the crystalline organs unique to their species began to resonate, faint pulses of light rippling beneath their skin, each glow synchronized with the slowing rhythm of their hearts. Far above, the alien warship cut through orbiting debris, its ancient hull humming as systems older than recorded history came fully online. Deep within the core where only royal blood was ever permitted, on the command deck, soldiers stood frozen as holographic projections flared into existence, displaying symbols that had not been activated since the founding wars. Resonance confirmed. One officer whispered, voice unsteady. Empathic ignition detected on a pre-contact world. "That's impossible," another replied, though fear had already crept into his tone. "That threshold requires intent without gain." The princess stepped forward slowly, her long ceremonial robes brushing the polished floor, her expression pale as the meaning settled into her bones. "A child," she said quietly, more to herself than to them. "It has to be a child." Her hand trembled as she placed it against the display, feeling the echo of the twins awakening like a distant heartbeat calling across the stars. Back in the snow, Eli finally wavered, his knees sinking deeper as exhaustion hit him all at once, the cold now clawing into his chest, each breath sharper than the last. He hugged himself instinctively, trying to remember how his mother used to sing when the nights were cold, the melody slipping through his thoughts like a half-remembered dream. The twins sensed the change immediately, panic flaring, their internal glow pulsing erratically. The smaller twin struggled free just enough to reach out again, its long fingers wrapping gently around Eli's sleeve. Not pulling, not demanding, just holding. The contact sent a shock through both of them. Eli gasped softly, not in pain but surprise, warmth blooming faintly where their skin touched, as if the twins themselves were trying to give something back. He looked down, eyes wide, a tiny smile breaking through his shivering. "You're warm now," he whispered, proud and relieved. "That's good." The twins exchanged a glance, a silent conversation carried through subtle shifts of light and pulse, a realization dawning that would alter the fate of their species forever. This human child was dying for them. Alien law classified such an act as an anomaly, something to be erased or studied from a safe distance, but ancient royal doctrine, buried beneath layers of conquest and regulation, spoke of a different response, a debt. On the warship, alarms shifted tone, No longer warnings but summons. Royal claim has been invoked. A soldier announced, disbelief giving way to awe. By whom is unknown, but the bond is active. The princess closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of destiny settle around her shoulders. Set course, she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. Prepare rescue protocols and medical bays, and notify the council that alien law has already been broken. A subordinate hesitated, then nodded sharply. By a human. No, the princess corrected softly. By a child who chose compassion. The warship turned, engines flaring bright against the void, slicing through space toward a frozen human outpost no map had deemed worth remembering. On the ground, snow continued to fall, thick and relentless, burying footprints and quieting the world. Eli's vision blurred, his body swaying as the cold pressed closer, the edges of his thoughts growing soft and heavy. The twins tightened the blanket around him as best they could, their own bodies now radiating gentle heat, instinctively trying to share what had been awakened within them. They held him there, three small figures bound together in the storm, unaware that above them, warships were moving, laws were bending, and fate itself was racing toward a 5-year-old human boy who had given everything without knowing why. The storm thickened as if the world itself sensed what was coming. Snow falling heavier, wind cutting sharper, wrapping the three small figures in a white veil that blurred distance and swallowed sound. Eli's breathing grew shallow, each inhale burning his chest, each exhale weaker than the last. His small body pressed between the twins as they struggled to keep him upright, their own fear now rising like a silent scream. They had never held another being this way before. Not in comfort, not in protection, not with desperation clawing at their thoughts. Their species was born into precision, emotion regulated, attachment delayed until usefulness was proven. Yet here they were, hearts racing in uneven rhythms, skin glowing brighter with every beat of panic. The larger twin tilted its head back slightly, eyes unfocused, as if listening to something far away, something only it could hear. Within its mind, ancient echoes stirred, memories not its own flowing up from genetic archives buried deep in crystalline thought structures. Images flashed of a time before conquest, before warships and law codes and enforced survival hierarchies. A time when their people believed that empathy itself was a force of the universe, rare and dangerous and sacred. They had called it the first bond, a phenomenon said to occur when a being acted with pure self-loss, when intention outweighed instinct, igniting dormant pathways capable of reshaping fate. It was dismissed as myth, a story told to children before discipline replaced wonder. Yet the glow beneath their skin told a different truth. The smaller twin pressed its forehead gently against Eli's shoulder, its body trembling not from cold but from a feeling too large to contain. Loss. It understood now what was being given, not just warmth but time, life, possibility. Eli stirred weakly, his eyelids fluttering, his lips parting as if he wanted to say something but lacked the strength to form words. The twins leaned closer, listening. I'm sleepy, he murmured, voice barely there. But it's okay. The words struck them harder than any weapon. Sleep in this cold meant never waking, a fact even a child half understood. Yet there was no fear in his tone, only trust. Above the clouds, the alien warship tore through space, its engines vibrating with restrained power, the hull responding to the rising resonance signal like a living thing awakening from a long slumber. On board, soldiers moved with urgent precision, but tension bled into every step, eyes drawn again and again to the readings that refused to stabilize. It's escalating, an officer said quietly. The empathic output is increasing, but the human life signs are dropping. The princess stood at the center of the command deck, her hands clenched at her sides, feeling the pull more strongly now, as if a thread had wrapped around her heart and was being drawn tight. She saw flashes too, fragments of emotion not her own, cold air biting small skin, the weight of a thin blanket, the warmth of another's life fading. This should not be possible, she whispered. A human child should not be capable of initiating a first bond. An elder advisor stepped forward slowly, his voice heavy with something close to reverence. "The bond does not measure power," he said, "only intent." The princess closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek before she could stop it, freezing halfway as the ship's temperature shifted. "Then we are already too late," she said softly, opening her eyes with renewed fire. "Increase speed, burn the engines if you must." On the frozen ground, Eli's head lolled gently to the side, his small body sagging. The twins reacted instantly, panic exploding through their shared awareness. Their internal glow flaring so bright it pushed back the snow around them, casting soft prismatic light into the storm. They did not know how to save him, only that they must. Instinct took over, ancient and untrained. The larger twin placed its palm flat against Eli's chest, feeling the weak flutter of his heart, and something deep within it cracked open, releasing a surge of warmth that flowed not outward but inward, threading through the human child's fragile systems. The smaller twin gasped, sensing the cost immediately, its own energy draining as the transfer began. Alien law forbade such an act, the sharing of life force across species lines classified as irreversible contamination. But law meant nothing here. Eli's breath hitched, then steadied slightly, color creeping faintly back into his cheeks. The twins sagged in relief and fear, knowing instinctively that they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Above them, sensors spiked violently, alarms flaring red across the warship's displays. Life force transference detected. A soldier shouted, "They've completed the bond." The princess staggered back a step, eyes wide. "They did it," she breathed. "They accepted him." The elder advisor bowed his head, voice barely audible. "Then the child is no longer alone." On the surface, the storm began to change, the wind shifting direction. The snow thinning just enough for a distant light to pierce the clouds, a low hum rolling across the sky like distant thunder. The twins looked up as one, eyes reflecting the glow, fear and hope tangled together. They tightened their hold on Eli, knowing without words that whatever was coming would not be gentle. Because when a first bond was formed, history showed only two outcomes: salvation or war. The light in the sky grew stronger, cutting through the storm like a blade, the low hum deepening into a sound that vibrated through bone and ice, making the snow at their feet tremble as if the planet itself was waking. The twins shielded Eli instinctively, drawing the blanket tighter around him as shadows passed over the clouds, vast and impossible. Eclipsing the faint stars above, the warship descended without fire or fury, no weapons hot, no sirens screaming, only a controlled, deliberate fall through atmosphere, its hull glowing with restrained power, ancient symbols igniting along its sides in response to the completed bond. Eli stirred again, eyes fluttering open just enough to see the sky move, his small brow creasing in confusion. "Is it morning?" he whispered weakly. The words pierced deeper than any cry for help ever could. Before the twins could respond, the ground around them erupted in light, a containment field snapping into place with surgical precision, pushing back the snow, stilling the wind, creating a bubble of calm in the heart of chaos. Figures appeared at the edge of the field, tall and armored, alien soldiers moving in perfect formation, weapons lowered but ready, visors reflecting the glow from the twins' skin. Fear surged through the twins, every lesson of capture and experimentation screaming through their minds, their grip on Eli tightening despite their exhaustion. Then the soldiers stopped, every single one of them. In unison, they dropped to one knee. The twins froze, disbelief rippling through their shared awareness. From between the ranks, a lone figure stepped forward, her presence commanding without force, robes flowing softly despite the artificial calm, eyes bright with unshed emotion. The alien princess approached slowly, carefully, as though afraid a sudden movement might shatter what stood before her. She looked not at the twins first, but at Eli, at the frost clinging to his lashes, the way his small chest rose and fell with fragile determination. Her breath caught. "So small," she whispered, voice trembling. And yet the bond answered. She knelt before them, lowering herself until her eyes were level with Eli's, her expression open and unguarded. "Human child, she said gently. Can you hear me? Eli squinted at her, studying the unfamiliar face with sleepy curiosity. You're shiny, he murmured, a faint smile tugging at his lips. A sound escaped the princess that was half laugh and half sob. Behind her, the soldiers shifted uneasily, some glancing at each other as if questioning reality itself. The elder advisor stepped forward, his voice heavy with gravity. Your Highness, he said, the council will not accept this. She did not look back, her gaze never leaving the child. They will, she replied quietly, because they must. She reached out slowly, placing her palm just above Eli's chest without touching, feeling the intertwined resonance of 3 lives pulsing together, human and alien bound by choice rather than blood. Her eyes widened. This is not just a first bond, she said, shock rippling through her tone. It's deeper. The twins felt it too, a sudden clarity cutting through their fear, memories unlocking, truths surfacing that their own people had buried for generations. The bond had not formed because Eli saved them. It had formed because he was the catalyst. The larger twins' eyes flared brighter as understanding crashed into place. A realization so vast it stole its breath. He is not bonded. To us, the twin conveyed softly through resonance, words finally shaping themselves between minds. We are bonded through him. The princess inhaled sharply, the implications unfolding rapidly. A nexus, she whispered. A living bridge. Alien law forbade nexus beings, not because they were dangerous in strength, but because they made lies impossible, empathy unavoidable, unity contagious. Such beings had ended wars before, dismantled empires without firing a shot, simply by existing. Eli yawned softly, unaware that entire civilizations trembled at the truth of him. Am I in trouble? He asked sleepily, sensing the tension despite the calm. The princess smiled through tears, shaking her head. No, she said, voice breaking. You changed everything. At that moment, the sky cracked open again, not with arrival but pursuit. A second warship tore through the clouds, its hull marked with harsh angular sigils, weapons glowing hot, alarms screaming across the first ship's sensors. Council enforcement vessel, a soldier shouted. They've tracked the signal. The comm shattered instantly, soldiers rising, shields flaring, the air thickening with imminent violence. The princess stood, fury igniting beneath her composure. They would risk a child, she said coldly. To preserve law. The twins pulled Eli closer, terror flooding back as the hostile ship locked targeting arrays onto the containment field. A voice boomed across the sky, amplified and merciless. By authority of the Galactic Council, it declared, the Nexus entity is to be seized or terminated. Eli flinched at the sound, pressing his face into the blanket. I don't like the loud one, he whispered. Something ancient and terrible awakened in response. The warship above them shifted configuration, weapons unfolding that had not been deployed in millennia, power surging through systems bound by royal blood and broken silence. The princess lifted her chin, eyes blazing as she issued the order that would fracture the galaxy. All units, she said, voice carrying across the battlefield. Defend the child. Above a frozen human outpost, 2 alien fleets faced each other, weapons primed, destiny balanced on a single trembling heartbeat. And at the center of it all, wrapped in a worn blue blanket, a 5-year-old human boy slept peacefully, unaware that the first battle of a new era was about to begin. The sky ignited without warning, streaks of light tearing across the clouds as the Council warship powered its weapons fully, space itself seeming to recoil as gravity fields bent and howled. The first shot did not strike the ground. It was a warning by Council standards, a controlled discharge meant to force surrender. Yet when it slammed into the upper atmosphere, the shockwave rippled outward, flattening snowfields and rattling the human settlement's remaining structures like paper. Eli jerked awake with a startled cry, clutching the blanket tighter as the world shook around him. His heart pounding wildly. The twins reacted instantly, curling their bodies around him. their skin flaring with prismatic light as the bond surged in response to fear. On the princess's warship, alarms screamed, shields snapping into place just as a second volley followed, hotter and far less restrained. "They're escalating," a soldier shouted. "Council weapons are charging to lethal output." The princess felt the bond recoil like a wounded animal, pain and terror flooding through it, her breath catching as Eli's fear echoed inside her chest, raw and helpless. "They know what he is now," she said tightly, "and they're afraid." Fear was dangerous when held by empires. Across the galaxy, relay stations lit up one by one as the Council invoked emergency doctrine, broadcasts flooding political cores and military hubs. A nexus had appeared, a living bridge capable of synchronizing empathy across species lines, capable of unraveling centuries of controlled narratives, enforced hierarchy, and lawful cruelty. If allowed to live, treaties would collapse, subject worlds would awaken, soldiers would hesitate, rulers would be questioned, entire civilizations built on fear would crumble. So the Council chose war. The hostile warship advanced through the storm, weapons glowing white-hot, flanked by smaller escorts tearing through atmosphere with ruthless precision. On the ground, the containment field flickered as the pressure mounted, cracks of light spiderwebbing through the air. Eli covered his ears, shaking, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Please make it stop," he whispered, not to anyone in particular. The words rippled outward through the bond like a shockwave. Across the princess's fleet, soldiers faltered mid-motion, hands trembling on weapon grips as an unfamiliar weight pressed on their minds. Memories surfacing unbidden, thoughts of home, of lost children, of choices made under orders they had never questioned. "What is happening?" one whispered, dropping to his knees. The elder advisor's voice shook with awe and horror. "The Nexus is amplifying," he said. "The child's fear is broadcasting empathy across the fleet." The princess stared at the display, watching enemy vessels hesitate, formation drifting as crews struggled against emotions they had been trained to suppress. "They can feel him," she breathed. The Council commander's voice cut through the chaos, strained and furious. "Do not listen," it barked across open channels. "Emotional interference is a hostile act. Maintain fire." Another blast tore through the sky, shields flaring dangerously close to collapse. On the ground, the twins screamed silently as pain lanced through the bond, their bodies shaking violently as they struggled to contain the surge. They were children too, not warriors, not conduits meant to carry such power. The larger twin collapsed to one knee, its glow dimming, life force draining rapidly. The smaller twin cried out through resonance, a desperate plea that reached Eli despite language barriers. "Help us." Eli looked at them through blurred vision. Fear still there, but something else rising beneath it, something stubborn and bright. He reached out with a shaking hand and pressed it against both of their chests, just as they had done for him. "I don't want anyone to hurt," he said softly, voice breaking. "Please." The bond flared brighter than ever before. Light erupted from the containment field, not destructive but overwhelming. A wave of shared sensation exploding outward across orbit and beyond. Racing through hyperspace relays faster than any signal ever recorded. In distant systems, crews froze mid-command as the feeling hit them. The terror of a child, the warmth of a shared blanket, the choice to give rather than take. On enslaved worlds, populations looked up in unison, hearts aching with a hope they had been taught was impossible. On Council worlds, leaders staggered as memories of long-buried atrocities clawed to the surface. The galaxy felt him. The Council warships' weapons faltered, power cycling erratically as crews broke down. Some weeping openly, others screaming in denial. "No," the commander roared. "Cut the relays, isolate the signal." Too late. The princess's sensors lit up with incoming signatures. Dozens, then hundreds, ships dropping out of hyperspace not in attack formation but defensive alignment. Independent fleets, border patrols, even former Council enforcers turning their hulls toward the child's position, responding to the call whether they understood it or not. "They're coming," a soldier whispered. "Everyone is coming." The princess straightened, resolve hardening into something unbreakable. Then the Council's era ends tonight, she said. The hostile warship, now surrounded by wavering allies and defectors, fired one last desperate shot toward the ground. A kill strike meant to erase the Nexus entirely. The twins screamed as the energy descended. Time seeming to slow. Eli did not move, did not run, did not hide. He lifted his head and looked up, eyes wide and wet. "Stop," he whispered. The blast struck the containment field and vanished, absorbed into a cocoon of light formed by the bond itself. Energy dissipating harmlessly like snow melting in sunlight. Silence fell across the battlefield, heavy and absolute. The Council commander stared at the readings in disbelief, voice hollow. What have we done? Above a frozen human world, surrounded by fleets no longer willing to obey fear, a 5-year-old human boy sat wrapped in a worn blue blanket, holding 2 alien children close. And across the galaxy, law shattered, destiny shifted, and the fate of empires began to unravel, driven not by conquest or battle, but by the unstoppable force of a child who refused to let anyone freeze alone. The silence did not last long. It never did when empires were wounded, but in that fragile pause something irreversible settled into place, like a fracture finally breaking clean. Across the void, ships drifted without firing, weapons hot yet unmoving, crews staring at displays they no longer trusted, orders echoing hollow against feelings they could no longer suppress. On the ground, the light around Eli and the twins slowly dimmed, the cocoon fading into a gentle glow, leaving 3 small bodies trembling from exhaustion. Eli's arms ached as he held the twins, his strength nearly gone, yet he refused to let go. His cheek pressed against the blanket, his breathing uneven but steady. The princess descended the last steps toward them, her guards parting instinctively, no one daring to stand between her and the child who had unmade the galaxy's lies. She knelt again, closer this time, close enough to feel the heat radiating faintly from the bond, close enough to see the frost melting from Eli's lashes. "You're safe now," she said softly, though she knew the words were only half true. Eli looked up at her, eyes tired but clear. "Are they going to stop being loud?" he asked quietly. Her throat tightened. "Yes," she promised. "They will." Above them, the Council warship drifted helplessly, engines throttled down, its escorts slowly peeling away, commanders realizing with dawning horror that obedience had evaporated. The Council leader's voice came through one final time, stripped of authority, raw and desperate. "This changes nothing," it insisted. "Law still stands. The child cannot be allowed to live unchecked." The response did not come from the princess. It came from everywhere else. Voices flooded the channels, captains and admirals and governors speaking not in unison but in conviction, words layered with emotion instead of protocol. "We refuse. We will not fire. We remember." The elder advisor closed his eyes as he listened, centuries of silence breaking apart around him. "The Nexus has reached critical spread," he said quietly. "Even if the child never speaks another word, the damage is done." The princess rose slowly, turning toward the sky, her voice carrying not through amplifiers but through resonance, strengthened by the bond itself. "This is the end of enforced forgetting," she declared. "Stand down or stand aside." On the ground, the twins stirred weakly, their glow flickering as the cost of everything they had done caught up to them. Eli felt it instantly, panic flaring again as their bodies grew heavier in his arms. "They're tired," he whispered urgently. "They need help." Medical teams rushed forward, restrained by nothing now, scanners sweeping over the twins' fragile forms, readings spiking into ranges never recorded. "They're burning out," a medic said, voice shaking. "Their life force reserves are critically low." Eli shook his head fiercely, tears spilling freely now. "No," he said. "They saved me, I have to help." The princess knelt beside him again, pain and awe warring in her expression. "You already have," she said gently. Eli looked down at the twins, at their closed eyes, their faint pulses of light. He remembered the cold, the way it hurt to breathe, the way the blanket had felt when he first wrapped it around them. Slowly, carefully, he did something no one expected. He pulled the blanket tighter around all three of them, then leaned forward and pressed his forehead against theirs. "I'll share," he whispered, voice barely there. "That's what you do." The bond surged again. Not explosively this time, but warm and deep. A steady flow instead of a storm. Energy moved both ways, not stolen, not forced, but offered freely. The twins' glow stabilized, their breathing easing as the transfer equalized. Not draining Eli, but anchoring him. The elder advisor staggered, gripping the edge of a console as realization struck. "He's not a conduit," he said hoarsely. "He's a stabilizer." The princess felt it too, the shift in the resonance, no longer volatile, no longer dangerous, but enduring, sustainable, a nexus that healed instead of burned. Across the galaxy, the empathic wave softened, fear giving way to resolve, grief turning into action. On occupied worlds, chains fell not by force but by refusal, soldiers laying down arms, citizens standing together for the first time in generations. On council worlds, leaders fled or surrendered as populations demanded answers they could no longer avoid. The council warship powered down completely, drifting powerless, its commander silent at last. The princess reached out and gently lifted Eli into her arms. Careful, reverent. "You've carried enough," she said, tears finally falling freely. Eli leaned against her, utterly spent, his eyes closing at last. "Can we go somewhere warm?" he murmured. "Yes," she whispered, holding him close as the twins were lifted onto medical stretchers beside them. "We're going home." Above a forgotten human outpost, surrounded by a galaxy in upheaval, rescue ships descended not as conquerors but as witnesses, and as the storm finally broke, snow thinning into quiet drifts, the age of obedience ended, not with a final battle or a fallen throne, but with a child choosing to share warmth one last time, knowing nothing of destiny, yet carrying it all the same. Warm light replaced the cold, not suddenly but gently, as if the universe itself was careful not to wake what it had almost lost. The medical bay humming softly with living machines and quiet voices. Eli slept wrapped in the same blue blanket, now cleaned and warmed, its fabric still worn but treated like something sacred, sensors hovering nearby tracking a small steady heartbeat that had become the most important rhythm in the galaxy. Beside him, the alien twins rested in translucent cocoons of healing light, their skin no longer flickering in panic but glowing evenly, peacefully. Their breaths slow and synchronized once more. For the first time since their birth, they dreamed, not of survival drills or extinction scenarios or law etched into memory, but of snow falling softly and a small human smile, offered without fear. The princess stood at the observation window, arms folded around herself, watching the three figures through glass that felt far too fragile to separate what they had become. Behind her, the galaxy reshaped itself in real time. Fleets standing down, councils dissolving, emergency charters rewritten or abandoned entirely. Messages poured in from every quadrant. Worlds declaring independence without firing a shot. Soldiers refusing orders they could no longer justify. Species long silenced finally speaking and being heard. All because a child had refused to let go. The elder advisor approached quietly, his voice heavy with history and relief. "The council is finished," he said. "What remains is already negotiating surrender." The princess nodded slowly, eyes never leaving Eli. "And the Nexus?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then smiled in a way she had never seen before, not measured or cautious, but hopeful. "It is no longer a threat," he said, "because it was never meant to be a weapon." As if on cue, Eli stirred, his eyelashes fluttering as he woke, eyes opening to warm light and unfamiliar shapes. He blinked, confused, then smiled faintly when he saw the twins nearby, safe and glowing. "They're okay," he whispered, relief washing over his tired face. The princess moved instantly, kneeling beside him, careful not to overwhelm. "They are," she said gently, "because of you." Eli frowned slightly, considering this. then shook his head. "I just shared," he said simply. "That's what you do." The words spread quietly through the room, carried by resonance rather than sound, settling into hearts already changed. In the days that followed, stories spread across the stars. Not exaggerated, not polished, just told as they were. A human child, a blanket, two freezing aliens. Some tried to turn it into myth, others into doctrine. But the truth resisted being owned, because it was too simple. The twins woke fully soon after, their first conscious act not to search for guards or orders but to reach for Eli, their hands finding his with instinctive certainty. This time, words formed, halting but clear, carried through shared understanding rather than language. Warmth, together. Eli laughed softly, squeezing their hands. "Yeah," he said. "That." The princess watched them, something easing inside her chest that she had carried since childhood. A weight she had believed was duty, now revealed as grief she had never been allowed to name. She knelt again, this time not as royalty but as witness. "Eli," she said, "the galaxy will ask things of you whether we allow it or not." He looked up at her, serious now but unafraid. "Do I have to be loud?" he asked. A smile broke through her tears. "No," she replied. "You only have to be kind." Arrangements were made quietly and carefully, not to elevate the child to a throne or symbol, but to protect the life he deserved. A place was chosen between worlds, warm and open, where humans and aliens lived side by side without titles or ranks. The twins stayed with him, not as guardians or subjects, but as family. Their bond no longer a mystery but a living reminder of what had been lost and found again. Years would pass. Historians would argue over dates and causes, over which treaty truly ended the age of enforced law, over which fleet fired the last shot that no longer mattered. But everyone agreed on one thing: the war ended before it truly began. Not because of superior weapons or clever strategy, but because a child showed the galaxy what courage looked like without armor, what power felt like without force. On quiet evenings, when stars filled the sky and the air was warm, Eli would sit wrapped in that same blue blanket, now mended many times over, the twins leaning against him as they watched ships pass peacefully overhead. Sometimes he would ask about the cold, about why things had been so hard, and the answer was always the same: because we forgot how to share. So the story was told again and again, not as legend but as lesson, passed from world to world, generation to generation, that destiny does not always arrive with fire and battle. Sometimes it arrives as a small hand offering warmth in the dark. And the universe, finally remembering itself, chooses to answer,